Basically what I was saying is so is Tech Symposium is coming up. If you haven't already signed up, go ahead and sign up. It's March 9th. It'll be at Mount SAC. And if you're new to cyber, highly recommend the one-on-one mentorship. And these are people that work for Google, Cisco, Meraki, Avanade, and CrowdStrike. And they kind of give you a clear direction as to where to start. And so we're right here. We'll be talking about DLL injection and malware analysis. And then we'll have a malware analysis workshop this Friday. And then definitely mark this on your calendar is the Tech Symposium on March 9th. So malware analysis and DLL injection. DLL injection is kind of, what does that really have to do with malware analysis? There's sort of like this methodology I always liked is the best blue teamers are the best red teamers and the best red teamers are the best blue teamers. So I try to incorporate like a red teaming tactic as well as blue teaming subject as well, which is malware analysis. So a little bit about me is my name is Sherry. I'm part of NCAE. So like a cyber team here at Cal Poly. Highly recommend if you guys are also new to cyber competition or haven't had any cyber competition experience to look into this one in particular. And I'm a CS major, CIS minor, and a fourth year here at Cal Poly. So just a overview of what I'll be talking about. I kind of want to go over some of the terminology used in malware analysis and DLL injection, just to sort of set up the baseline as some of the more popular terms that are used. And then I'll be giving like a general malware analysis overview. And then we'll go into the specific steps of malware analysis. And then towards the end, we'll also talk about DLL injection. So the terminology, it's definitely important to understand what detection to response systems are. Everything's fine. Don't worry about that. So yeah, detection to response systems, we have EDR, NDR, MDR, XDR, IDS, IPS. These are kind of a lot of acronyms to get confused by, but essentially, depending on what side you are on, it's important to have like a good foundational knowledge of these detection and prevention systems, mainly because if you're a malware developer, your goal is to evade these systems. And if you're a malware analyst, your goal is to enhance and improve these systems. Specifically with malware development, it's not so easy to get access to these systems. So you'll usually be right here on the EDR portion. And an example of this is Windows Defender. A lot of these other detection and prevention systems are very expensive, and I believe it may also be somewhat illegal to test against them. So I'll also be mindful of that as well. And then kind of transitioning to threat actors and what they are. Their goal is mainly just to steal data, extort money. Sometimes they'll use like methods like ransomware, and they'll encrypt data. And usually companies will pay that ransom as well. One example that happened recently is City of Glendale was hit with a ransom attack. So these attacks still are relevant today and something to be cautious about. They also use like persistence methods. So if they're detected, and the machine is rebooted, once rebooted, the machine will still establish a network connection to the threat actor's machine. So that way they can still execute commands from whatever remote location that they're on. And then usually they also try to like leverage privileges. They'll try to get administrative access. That way they can just kind of own the entire network. And then kind of transitioning to threat hunters, the detection and prevention systems we mentioned earlier, these will go ahead and notify the threat hunters. And once they're notified, they'll go ahead and look at that specific portion on the network. And from there, they'll try to, well, they will eliminate or remove the threat. And then from there, they'll go ahead and proceed with resolution steps to go ahead and ensure that the same attack can't be made. And usually they're like remnants or artifacts, meaning that like some sort of file is left behind. And that's usually given to the malware analyst, which is what we'll be talking about next. So once that file is given to the malware analyst, they'll go ahead and examine it. These files can be anything from executables or DLL files, which are dynamic link libraries, which is also a subject that we'll be talking about in this presentation. And their goal is to understand how the malware operates. They need to have a clear understanding of how it operates, how the attacker gained initial access to the network or the host in general. And the outcome is to create file signatures to go ahead and strengthen the prevention and detection systems to prevent similar attacks from happening in the future. So I also wanted to give an overview, like a visual. Personally think visuals help me learn at least. So on the left side, we have the threat actor. Usually they're using like a command and control server. And from there, they'll communicate to the target network through the internet. Once they gain access, if detected, the threat hunter will be notified through the intrusion prevention or detection systems. And once the threat is eliminated, usually if they're not stealthy enough, they'll find the file or executable that's left behind. And then from there, I kind of put the malware analysts in their own little sandbox because they're isolated from the network. They'll actually be executing this malware intentionally. And once it's executed, you don't want that to affect the network as well. So one reason, or there are many reasons, but there's also a malware sample called, or just malware technique called a worm, which can spread across the network. So another reason to kind of execute it within an isolated environment. And then I'll kind of just be giving an overview on what this is. This is called shellcode. It can be generated by a offensive security tool called Metasploit. And this is its human readable form. It's in hexadecimal characters, but just below it is its raw form, and it just kind of looks like gibberish. But this is actually just ones and zeros that the CPU will read and execute. So this particular shellcode, we're telling the CPU to go ahead and execute the calculator application. And then here's a quick demo. This is by no means stealthy. It'll easily be detected by like an endpoint detection system like Windows Defender. But I just want to give a visualization of it in action. So we usually execute the program through the command prompt. Here's the shell code. It needs to be loaded into memory, and similar to like Windows or Linux file system, we need to give it the correct permissions as well. Memory also has read, write, and execute permissions. So within this program, it's a little hard to see. We assign those, we allocate it to memory, give it the correct permissions, and then from the command prompt, we can go ahead and execute it. So we'll see a calculator be spawned, and this is the actual calculator application on the Windows system. And so it seems harmless, right? Shellcode calculator, it's, big whoop. But what's kind of stopping an attacker from kind of changing the shellcode to establish a network connection and start opening ports? So that's the main reason the Microsoft Defender will sort of intentionally target shellcode and delete the program from memory. Whoops. And then I'll give like a general overview of the Windows architecture. I think it's pretty good to understand, but we won't be diving too deep into it. Usually when you create or develop applications, we'll be right here in this user application space. And then we need to access the kernel to sort of use these lower level functions like allocating memory, or even just doing simple things like creating files and whatnot. And to do that, we use what's called subsystem DLLs, which are also known as Windows API. And I'll go into that just a little bit later as well. And even that's still not enough to access this lower level kernel space. We need to kind of call this middleman called the NTDLL. So from the user application space, we'll call these subsystem DLLs, which notify this kind of middleman, and then this middleman kind of goes down into this kernel space and tells the operating system what the user is trying to complete. And like I said, it could be allocating memory or just something simple like creating a file. And then kind of adding on to that, this is like I guess, somewhat deeper or same type of overview as the slide before. This is our user application. We kind of called these Windows API. This one in particular is the read process memory. From there, this read process memory is stored in this DLL. We can think of DLLs as like literal books, saying like, hey, can you open this book and search for the read process memory? So that's essentially what DLLs are. And then this DLL we'll call the NTDLL, which has higher permissions to go ahead and access this lower portion of the operating system called the kernel space or kernel mode. And then just a visualization on Windows API, what it looks like. It's just a function. It's nothing too complicated. We just make calls to these Windows API functions. If you've ever coded and called the function, it's similar to that. All you need to do is just make sure that you fulfill the Windows requirements of what data. It has to be the correct data type that the Windows documentation is asking for. And from there, you can go ahead and complete whatever you're trying to complete. So in this particular one is just, we're just reading a process from memory. And then kind of continuing on with the executable Windows executables. Within the Windows executables, we have these different sections called text section, data section, read-only section, and resource section. This is really important, mainly because DLLs and just general programs that you have on your Windows machine all have these sections. So why does it matter? Basically, threat actors can go ahead and allocate malicious code into these sections. So as malware analysts, we have to make sure we search through these specific sections to try to find the malicious code, sometimes being, or most often than not being the shellcode that we saw earlier. I also found this section to be interesting, the resource section. This is where like icons of the application are stored. And within these images, you can actually store shellcode as well, malicious shellcode. So it's a big cat and mouse game when it comes to malware development and malware analysis. And this is a malware analysis technique and also a malware evasion technique in one. With malware analysis, we sort of look through these sections and we can grab specific bytes within the text section that I mentioned earlier. And we can create rules to go ahead and look within the executable if the specific memory locations exist within it. And this isn't foolproof. On the right, we have that shellcode we saw earlier, and we can easily evade, well, not easily, it's a little complicated, but we can evade these signature detection. And right here, we see regular shellcode, and it might be a little hard to see, but on the right, it converts the shellcode into legitimate IP addresses. So something like signature detection most likely won't work in this instance. So kind of adding on to signature detection, the formal name is YARA rules. And essentially what I mentioned earlier is we'll grab the bytes within the executable, place them inside a variable, and then compare it against the executable file. This kind of speeds up the analysis process. If we have like a another sample that has the same characteristics and attributes to the sample that we're analyzing, then we can go ahead and identify it very quickly. For example, if we have a malware sample that has characteristics similar to a worm, we can just pull existing YAR rules from the internet and then compare it with the sample that we're analyzing. And if the comparisons match to the characteristics of a worm malware, then we can go ahead and label the sample as having characteristics of spreading throughout the network. And just a quick overview on the different types of malware. There's ransomware, spyware, Trojans, worms, rootkits, keyloggers. Those are honestly the ones that I find the most interesting. Ransomware is just encrypting data, and unfortunately, sometimes you do have to pay to go ahead and decrypt that data. And then Trojan, same thing. It looks like a legitimate executable program, and once executed, it'll go ahead and complete its malicious actions. And then worms, they spread throughout the network. Rootkits, they give hackers remote control of the victim's device. There's actually an interesting backstory on this regarding Sony. If you have time, highly recommend to look into that. And then keyloggers, these are, I was a bit skeptical on this, but they they do work. They do literally log each key that you input. So very interesting types of malware. And then going into the DLL portion, DLL injection portion. So with this kind of like an overview with the diagram, essentially we open a process. Let's say this is like the Notepad application. If that process is executed, we can go ahead and allocate memory and then put like this malicious book inside of it. And then once that malicious book is inside of the Notepad application, we can go ahead and execute the instructions within that book. And I'll provide a demonstration on this as well. But yeah, basically just identify a process, allocate memory within the target address space, and then we write a path to our malicious code. And then once it has the correct permissions, we can go ahead and execute it. So enough of the terminology, kind of going into the actual portion of malware analysis is the main tools that are important to sort of dive into this topic. Flare VM is one of the more popular, it's a script. It's one of the more popular scripts that are used for malware analysis. You don't need this, but it does automate and save you a lot of time. If you you don't use this, what you'll use is just the Windows operating system. And the unfortunate part is if you decide not to install the script, is if you're analyzing malware, find out you don't have the necessary tools to continue with your analysis, you'll have to revert to an old snapshot, lose your progress, download the tools that you need, and then restart analysis all over again. Whereas here it gives you all of the necessary tools for malware analysis. And then another important operating system is Remnux. This is a Linux machine developed by, I don't think it was developed by SANS, but someone affiliated with SANS went ahead and created this, and you can download this from the SANS website. And same thing, it provides a Linux environment with the necessary tooling for malware analysis as well. So very similar to Flare VM, but just a different operating system. And then here's the topology that's used when it comes to malware analysis. Usually we'll have these within a virtual environment. Production and professional environments do sometimes have like dedicated machines that will have this on the actual host computer. But more often than not, this is the typical topology that if you decide to do this will look like. So we put these into a host-only network connection, meaning that only the two machines are connected with each other. and only the two machines can communicate with each other. We don't want a connection to the host because malware might spread to the host. The good part about this topology is the host will still have a connection to the router. So if you need to do research, you can still use your host machine to go ahead and look into certain API call or Windows APIs and whatnot. So yeah, these will be contained within its own private network to prevent the host from being infected. And then snapshots are huge when it comes to malware analysis. Especially with Flare VM, you want to create a snapshot before installing Flare VM because it's such a large script, or it's such a long script that installs so many tools that something can go wrong. And you don't want to have to reinstall Windows and restart all over. It's best to just create a snapshot when you have Windows installed and then go ahead and install Flare VM. And then go ahead and create more snapshots if you add more tools and whatnot. Another thing too is if you're analyzing malware, you need to go back or pause it at a certain point. You can go ahead and pause it and then resume later on. That's another great thing about working within virtual machines. And another great thing is if you're analyzing, if you need to analyze more than one malware sample, you definitely want to have snapshots so you can revert back to a clean state, which is a snapshot that does not have the malware executed. Reason being is if you execute more than one malware sample in the same state, it'll be hard to determine what network calls belong to which malware sample. So it'll just save you a bunch of time and a headache as well. So kind of getting into specifics of malware analysis, we start with basic static analysis. And what this looks like is we'll get the file hashes of the malware sample. They just look like long strings of numbers, but these are also considered or known as digital fingerprints. So we can consider this to be like the malware sample's fingerprint. On the right-hand side it's kind of, I like to call it like the utility knife of malware analysis. It's called PE Studio. It's great for static analysis because it does more than one thing. You can get the file hashes as well as it'll show you what Windows API calls the malware sample is using on the right. And then it'll also show you which ones are malicious. It'll label that for you. So that's a great feature that it implements. And then continuing with static analysis, we have strings. We'll execute a command in the command prompt called strings, and it'll output essentially just what it says, the strings of the executable. And we can see the Windows API calls being made here. We can also see that it tries to access the PowerShell executable along with to the right is like a file path. And then we have floss and kappa. These are kind of perform the same thing, but I specifically wanted to focus on kappa because I like the way it formats it. The strings to us, it'll tell you what the Windows API does at the top. And then it'll also highlight the specific Windows API functions as well. So it gives you like a cleaner, more user-friendly format for static analysis. And then kind of transitioning to malware analysis engines. There's more than one, but this one right here is VirusTotal. This kind of does the same thing as what we do within the operating system. We can obtain the digital fingerprints and kind of backtracking. What we'll do is either we'll upload the malware sample to these virus engines, or we'll grab those digital fingerprints and upload it to the malware analysis engine. And then from there, it'll tell you what the sample does if it's already been identified. And then it'll also show you its creation time and the Windows API calls that it uses. I've read that if you are working in the industry, sometimes companies don't like to report malware samples to these engines. So there may be inaccuracies when uploading samples here. You might not get any reports at all. And also in the industry, sometimes malware samples contain enterprise data. So this may not always be an option to upload samples to, depending on uh, the enterprise's standards or what they want and don't want done. So kind of transitioning to basic dynamic analysis. I think this is like the most exciting part. Now we kind of get into the actual execution of the malware. Usually malware will come in a zipped format with a passcode to go ahead and unzip it. And then once it's unzipped, it'll have like this file, this appended file extension to it. This is to prevent accidental execution. Once you're ready to execute, you'll just remove this file extension and then just like a typical program, just double click it. And then the goal for dynamic analysis is to conduct behavioral analysis on the sample. So with file hashes, it's not foolproof. There's something called hashing collisions, meaning if you upload a sample to the malware engine, it might give you an output for a different sample than what it actually is. For example, if you upload a sample to the engine and it reports that it's a worm, in actuality, the malware sample that you have can be something entirely different. And yeah, this would usually be performed after static analysis. And then I have a quick video that was pretty interesting. Malware can be very sophisticated and detect the environment that it's within. If it detects that it's actually within a virtual environment, it can delete itself from memory. If it detects that there's no network connection, it can also delete itself from memory. So I went ahead and defanged the malware, so now it'll be executable. And once executed, we'll see that it's no longer there. So it was deleted from memory. So it's a good idea. It's so weird. It's a good idea to back up your malware sample as well, just because if you detonate it and it deletes itself, then you're kind of in big trouble. So just another thing to be mindful of as well. And continuing with the malware analysis portion, this is kind of where Remnux is very important, is we'll set up like a fake network simulator. So yeah, if you're wondering like how do we prevent it from deleting itself from memory, we'll make the malware think that it actually has a network connection by setting up this this network simulator. And this is done using Remnux, the Linux machine. And then usually we'll attach this application called Wireshark on that network connection, so it can go ahead and see all the network calls that the malware sample is attempting to make. So yeah, this prevents self-deletion, and Flare VM and Remnux will be connected to each other and we can see what calls are being made. And then continuing on dynamic analysis, Procmon and Process Hacker are also great tools to identify what real-time file system changes are being made, registry changes that are also being made, and then any activity, so any execution or deletion activity. And Procmon is this right here. Behind it, you can see all the malicious activity that the sample has done. And then in front of it, Procmon has a great filtering tool, so you can go ahead and look for specific occurrences that the malware has made on the operating system. And then just below it, Process Hacker is also a great tool. Similar to Procmon, we can see like the parent and child processes visually. And then it also will highlight what is deleted and what is has been spawned. If something has been newly created, it'll have like a green highlight. And then advanced static analysis would be the next portion of the malware analysis chain. This is probably one of the more complicated sides of malware analysis. In actuality, malware analysis is reverse engineering. It's a lot of reverse engineering. This is the overview of the malware sample's executable path. This isn't even the entire overview of its executable path. There's actually more than this, but yeah, I thought this image was a pretty good visualization. And then to the right of it is these samples inner working. So during this stage, you'll be doing a lot of reverse engineering, specifically with assembly instructions. The two assembly instructions that are good to know, or instruction sets, are 32 and 86 instruction sets. And this particular malware sample, when you're given the executable, you don't necessarily know what language is being used. So once you get into the inner workings, from there, you'll actually be able to tell what language the malware sample is using. This one specifically is called NIM, which is a little weird. I never really dealt with this language, but what I found interesting about this is usually any typical program has a main function where it begins execution. But with the NIM programming language, it has three main functions. So you have to find where the entry point of execution begins with this particular language, which is, I guess, can also be considered like a obfuscation technique, meaning that the malware developer tries to make the job harder for the analyst to determine how the sample works. So the tools that are used for reverse engineering are IDA-Pro, Ghidra, and Cutter. IDA-Pro is the industry standard. Ghidra is also very good as well, but I believe it doesn't have a debugger attached to it, so it's kind of one of its limitations. And then Cutter, it's not as popular, but I think it's more user-friendly, and these images are Cutter right here. So yeah, and the main goal during reverse engineering is to just reveal the malware sample's true path of execution. And sort of adding to that, now we go into advanced dynamic analysis, where we attach a debugger to the malware sample and also continue with execution. Reason we do this is when we initially execute the malware, it will follow only one path. And if there are any environmental variables, it'll follow different paths based on that as well. And I'll explain on that here. So we attach a debugger to the malware sample, and there's this, it's hard to see, but it's called is debugger present. If the malware sample detects if it's attached to a debugger, it'll jump to a different execution path. So you'll have to modify the registry or one of the registers in the debugger to continue with its intended path of execution. So yeah, that's another obfuscation technique. And then going into DLL injection, I provided a demo, and then I'll kind of go over what's going on as well. So I used the tool I mentioned earlier. It's called Metasploit. That tool, we can generate shellcode, and same thing, it's kind of a utility knife. It can do it has many or a lot of functionality. And here I specifically set up a listener. So I set up like a reverse TCP connection. So this is my target machine's IP and the port number to listen on the target machine, or attacking machine, I'm sorry. And then this is the target machine. I have the what's called the injector, which is this executable here. We can think of an injector as us injecting the book into the process that we're attacking, which is specifically the notepad process. And from there, once we inject the code into the notepad process, we can go ahead and instruct it to load our malicious DLL. And you can see right here, Swift is awesome. DLL, it'll load this into memory. So once we execute it, we can see here, oh, well, it's pretty quick, but we can see here Swift is awesome. The Notepad executable went ahead and loaded this into its memory. And then the payload was executed as well. We can see here. And I just clicked it just to verify that it was actually loaded into its memory space. And as malware developers, or if you're getting into malware development, it's also great to verify using a debugger that it was actually loaded into memory. So that's what I'm doing here, is I'm attaching a debugger to the Notepad process. And I want to visually see that, hey, this is actually loaded into memory, and it's not just the command prompt giving me wrong information. So I go ahead and grab this memory address and explicitly search for it in the debugger. And then I'll go ahead and look for it in its memory space. And we can see here that Swift is awesome DLL is actually loaded into memory. And then, so what does this really do? So kind of going back to our attacking machine, we can see it established a reverse shell. And then I can go ahead and access the target machine's directory and either start setting up privilege escalation or persistence methods from there. And yeah, Swift is awesome. You can see the directory. And continuing from there, this Friday, sort of wrapping up, I feel like today was a lot of visuals and not so much hands-on. So for the workshop, the goal is to have you guys get hands-on experience with malware analysis. There'll be 3 unidentified samples that you guys will have to determine its functionality. And we'll mainly be focusing on dynamic and static analysis, just because I don't think it's really, sorry, I don't know what that is. It's the video. You want to take over?
I don't know what the stats come.
I think it was a YouTube link that I clicked.
Oh, it stopped. Oh,
It's on recon on steroids. Interesting. Thank you. Yeah, so goal of the workshop is to actually get you guys hands-on experience with malware analysis. Some samples will require usage of Remnux, and others you can just perform on Flare VM. So it'll also be nice to understand how to establish that connection between the 2 VMs and how to transfer the malware samples to the virtual machines as well. So yeah, if this is a subject that interests you, I provided the resources here. I highly recommend TCM Security Academy, and this is a book, Practical Malware Analysis. Some of the Discord forums that I've joined, the reverse engineers that I've had small conversations with, all recommend this book. So that's a great place to start. So thank you guys for your time. Hope this was somewhat informative. Hope you guys enjoyed the topic. Yeah, thank you. Great question. Oh, they can find the slides on Linktree. I'm sorry. Yeah, if you guys are interested and want to read this on your own time, I've also provided like speaker notes on some of the slides that provide more information. So yeah, if you guys want to read up on that, you can go ahead and look into that as well. So yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.